So welcome to plenary panel. It's all of us against the disease, the future of research collaborations and disease community consortia, which will be led by Katherine Maynard. If you have any questions during the session, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. All of the sessions are being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. Please make sure to silence your cell phones. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Gosh, those lights are something else. Okay. Really excited to be up here. We have a great panel of individuals, and I think they're going to have some really interesting and informative stories to share with you. My name is Katherine Maynard. I work at PWR, which is a healthcare regulatory firm, and we help companies on their development programs. But a key priority for me during my work day is to really advise companies to create and develop meaningful, enduring, sustainable relationships with advocacy organizations and that support evidence generation. And it's one of the reasons that I'm here at Global Genes, because I think they've been on the forefront and very prescient on looking at how to collect patient-level data that patients own. And so I've been learning and following closely along with the developments on RAREX. So I think that today, I've heard this word collaboration pretty repeatedly over the last couple of days, and so I kind of went to the dictionary to get an actual definition. And it was that collaboration is to work jointly with others, often on something of an intellectual endeavor. And it can be similar to cooperation, but requiring leadership. And today, I think you're going to see and hear from 3 individuals who exemplify leaderships on the efforts that they're moving forward. And what's really interesting is that they're at different points of this collaboration continuum, and we know that this is an odyssey. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Carole to get us started, and she'll introduce herself, why she's here, and then a little bit of about her project, and then we'll move on. Carole?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Carole Bakhos, and I'm humbled to be here with you all. Our family lives in Colorado. I have a 10-year-old kiddo, Yara, who is my rare child, and we have a 4-year-old son as well. And Yara got diagnosed 8 years ago now with a rare genetic condition. It's a mutation in the gene PPP2R5D, lots of letters and numbers like all our genes, but now it's called Jordan syndrome. And at the time, there were 6 known cases in publication, so there was very little known. We were sent on our way. But thankfully, our story is very different now than it was when we first started, because our community with Jordan syndrome is just over 300 families from 38 countries today. And we're a very close-knit community. This is a picture of our last conference in New York City. We had 70 families fly in from all over the world, and we used that opportunity to kick off our natural history study. So we had our team from Columbia University come to our conference. We have 30 people there collecting EEGs, doing all the assessments, blood samples, everything, you name it. And we're hoping to do that again next summer for our 2024 conference. I'm also fortunate to be playing a role with Jordan's Guardian Angels. It's a nonprofit that is leading awareness and research into Jordan syndrome. And I remember having that very first conversation with the foundation chair, Joe Lang, who is a dad to a child with Jordan syndrome. He's Jordan's dad, actually. And she was just diagnosed, and he connected with me as one of the admins on our Facebook group. We had a small group going. We had small-scale research at that point. And we just clicked immediately, and we were referred to talk to Dr. Wendy Chung. I'm sure a lot of you have worked with Dr. Chung before. So we meet with her, and she gives us a list. She's like, here you go. Here's 9 collaborators you need to solve this. And she called it the dream team. And we're like, okay. So we went and we called every one of them and asked, do you want to be on our team? And we were so worried. We're like, they're going to be so busy. They're not going to want anything to do with us. And our dream team is going to just shatter, right? But thankfully, they said yes, every single one of them. And then we learned they were going to Phoenix for some conference they had, so we showed up. We're like, hey, let's have our first research meeting, and that was our first workshop. And we used that time to put together like a high-level plan. If we could do anything we wanted to do, what would the next 18 months look like? And we asked them to go and give us a proposal. This is, based on this high-level plan, this is our piece in solving this puzzle, and this is what we would need to make it happen. One, we had no idea what we were doing. I mean, this was all very new to us. And two, we had no funding strategy. But three, we felt like we had to make it happen. So we went back and we kind of rallied our families and we said, here's what's happening and we need to raise this amount of money to kick off our pilot program. And then we can use this money to go and get additional grants and funding to move the research forward. Today, Jordan's Guardian Angels has a master agreement across all 9 institutions, that same dream team that we contacted and the foundation, that says that this has to be a real-time collaboration, that we're all gonna work together. We're not gonna work and wait on publications. We're gonna share data in real time. And actually, we as a foundation drive these discussions. So every 2 months, we meet either virtually or in person, and everyone shares their data, their findings, what they're working on. We have working meetings, we have brainstorming sessions. We keep that conversation going. And we realized through this that they really don't know how to do that in a collaborative way. So we had to kind of lead that discussion, ask the questions, bring them together. Also, as part of that agreement is that while they each own their own intellectual property as a foundation, we own the licensing rights. And the thought process there was that we didn't want to do all this work and reach a point where it's like a $1,000 pill that none of our families can access. So we needed leverage when we go to pharma and say, hey, we've done all this and we need to get it to market. So we have the licensing rights to the work, and if any financial gains come out from this project, regardless of where it comes out from, it gets divided equally amongst everyone involved. So this is a true collaboration, and that really drove the team to work together and be excited to do that and to help our families. So in just 5 years, we went from not knowing barely anything about the gene and the disease to planning clinical trials for 2024. We have 2 drugs that we're repurposing that have shown promise in the cells and in the mice, and we're working towards trying them in our children, and we hope that's gonna bring our families the relief that they're looking for. But we truly believe if it wasn't for that collaboration, I don't think we would be at this stage in the research today.
Great. Thank you, Carole.
Cool.
You got one.
So I loved the 2 things that you said there about creating an incentive structure and then also setting the cadence and the timeline. We said we're not going to wait for papers. We're going to talk before then, and we're going to talk every 2 months. And I think that's one of the things that is overlooked. If we wait to meet every year, that's the pace we set. If we meet every 2 months, we set a faster pace, and that's cool. Hi, I'm Ryan. That's me in the bottom left silhouette there with the funny hair. I do some work around Pompeii, and we're trying to form a consortium going forward there. I think Carole and Adam have some really cool examples of what they've actually accomplished and achieved, and so we're in our forming stages a little bit. So I'm going to go philosophical for a second, and then talk about why. So quickly going down an annoying semantics route, and then back to high level, and then maybe hitting the human nature part of the topic description along the way. I love It's All of Us. I do not like against, and we are collectively interested in more than just singular the disease. So making it work for me, I guess I'd interpret the disease as the unknown, and all of us as moving towards it. So wordsmithing aside, we're at a really exciting time. We're arriving at an ability to compile and process through more data than we've ever been able to. And we have an increasing awareness of the value of data. Some of this has unfortunately come from some bad behaviors around ownership and publishing and sharing. But either way, we're at this point where we can accelerate the knowledge development, which can be really mutually beneficial to everybody in our ecosystem. So some scene setting for Pompeii. As far as rare diseases go, we've got a pretty established historical advocacy presence. There are people and orgs who have accomplished really incredible things, including, to put it in a time frame context, almost 20 years ago now, the approval of our first treatment. And we have double-digit companies working in the Pompeii space right now. So within that context, there's been moments and behaviors as well that we've learned from where things have gone a little bit Shakespearean, like the Montagues and Capulets. And so we have this as our setting. We even have some existing geographic and role-specific consortia and lots of different advocacy orgs, some that are with long history, some that are new, some that are big, some that are small. So why does a consortium matter for us? And it's specifically because of that potential for a fractured space where we have the same common interest in helping the health of our family and our loved ones, but we each have a different idea potentially, or a different perspective on what our role in doing that is. And so in our view, we kind of feel that true ecosystem health can only be maximized to the extent that there's a framework open to all to contribute and benefit. And that openness helps to ensure directional alignment of what it means to have a healthy ecosystem. So we're working through the headwinds of bringing folks together to build this town square for our community, and this is kind of the ethos that we're starting with. It's meant to be an intersection of multiple roles, and it doesn't work if it's only selected roles. We're going to develop a responsible and respectful structure that supports the interest of all the roles, but keeps the health of the knowledge developed to help people live healthier lives at the center and as our North Star. And part of that is patients must own the data. We're at that point now. And our belief structure, and this is something that we, from the very first meeting we had with folks in the ecosystem, we said these are the things that, like, we can change everything, we can do anything we want, but these are the things we cannot change. If you're in, it means that you share these common set of beliefs. So our big one here is that our competition is against the unknown and not each other. And that we really want to foster that innovation cycle, which really means that we accelerate curiosity and resolution and ability to run that cycle as many times as possible. And everybody has to be an important part of it. And I guess I'll stop so we have more time for discussion and questions later, but you can read it at your own peril.
Thanks, Ryan. Adam?
Thanks, Ryan. So I'm Adam Staffaroni. I'm a neuropsychologist at the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF. Clinically, I administer cognitive evaluations to patients with a variety of different age-related cognitive issues. But on the research side, I study neurodegenerative diseases with a focus on something called frontotemporal dementia, or FTD, which is a rare early onset condition. My research is really around improving early diagnosis, prognosis, and longitudinal monitoring, all with the eye towards improving the efficiency of clinical trials in this disease. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about the FTD Prevention Initiative, or FPI, which is a global organization that we've been forming. So as I mentioned, FTD is an early onset neurodegenerative condition. If you look at the picture there, the purple are the frontal and temporal lobes that are affected by this disease. Unlike Alzheimer's disease that affects memory, this disease affects people's personality and their behavior. So people can become socially inappropriate, apathetic, even lose sympathy. There can be speech and language changes and motor changes as well, including Parkinsonism and ALS. It's a rare disease, so if you look across FTD, there's 10 out of 20 per 100,000, but once you get into sort of specific causes, it becomes much more rare. So up to 30% of these cases are autosomal dominant. Most of them caused by one of these 3 mutations you see in that first row, with C9orf72 being the most common form of genetic form of both frontotemporal dementia as well as ALS. And about 10 years ago, there was a multi-center natural history study that was formed with the support of the NIH. It's now called All-FTD. It's grown to 27 centers around the country. We've enrolled over 2,000 participants with frontotemporal dementia. We bring them in annually for pretty deep phenotyping. They come in for 2 to 3 day visits, everything from clinical assessments to imaging and blood and CSF. And one of the PIs from that study, Adam Boxer, joined forces with John Rohrer from UCL. John runs the GenFi consortium over there. You can see the sort of all the points on the map in Europe. They're a 40-center consortium. They've been around a little bit longer than All-FTD. And they really brought together a number of cohorts from around the world that are all studying familial forms of FTD. They're in various stages of contributing to this consortium, but you can see the cohorts on that map and then the cohort leads at the bottom. And the goals of FPI are really to bring together a network of FTD cohorts and researchers to promote clinical trials of new therapies to prevent FTD, with the key aims of creating an international database of familial FTD research participants who might be eligible for clinical trials. This can help us identify cohorts for treatment trials and accelerate the development of analytic models that I'll talk about in a moment. Also to create uniform standards for the conduct of clinical trials in familial FTD syndromes. So one of my roles in the FPI consortium has been developing the data infrastructure that we're using to house the harmonized data. So far, we've pulled together data from the All-FTD and the GenFi cohorts. We've developed this curated set of variables across genetics, clinical history, neurologic exam, and the availability of biomarkers. Our website, which is unfortunately down currently, has a number of different data visualizations to help people understand the data that's available. We have a cohort explorer tool, so if people are interested in requesting the data, they can get a sense of the sample sizes and what data we have. And we're in the sort of later stages of finalizing a federated data request process, kind of going through data use agreements and governance now. And I wanted to share just a little bit about some of the insights and the successes I think that have come out of this collaborative effort. One of them is this paper from Katrina Moore, in which she showed sort of the prevalence of FTD mutations, sort of how they differ around the globe. And in this graph on the right, she was also looking at sort of what was the relationship between a parent's age of onset and a child's age of onset. And I think you can appreciate these look more like blobs than they do lines, and that's because there's not a clear relationship between when a parent gets the disease and a child. Some can get it in their 30s and some in their 80s within the same family, and this has been a major challenge for us for thinking about clinical trials. In familial forms of Alzheimer's disease, you can do pretty well, plus or minus 5 years of understanding when somebody's gonna get it. We can't really do that. And so one of the things that we've done, and we only really could do by leveraging this global collaboration, is to develop models of disease progression that came out of this. So these sort of models have been used in other rare diseases, and one of the things you can do is by combining across all the different data types that we're collecting, you can estimate how far somebody is from their disease onset, and this can be a tool for bringing somebody into a clinical trial when they're closer to having symptoms. We can actually use it to select trial endpoints. And you can use it as a tool for even analyzing the effects of an intervention that might lead to deviations from how you expect somebody to progress. And sort of another example of this is using the natural history data to supplement or replace a placebo arm in a clinical trial in a rare disease. All of this is moving towards being able to run clinical trials with the fewest number of people possible. This is to give you a sense of the sample. This pretty much represents most of the familial FTD cases that are engaged in research across North America and Europe. So we have over 1,000 mutation carriers with over 2,000 observations. And we also have 600 family members from these families who don't carry the mutation but contribute really valuable information to us. And not to get into the details, but this is sort of the models that came out of this work. Each of these is a different genetic mutation. And if you look at just one of these graphs across the bottom, we have time. So this is how far we estimate that somebody is from disease onset, with the negative numbers representing the pre-symptomatic phase, 0 is the onset of symptoms, and then the positive numbers are after somebody develops symptoms. And what you can see here is we can start to understand sort of when these different biomarkers are changing. We can see many years before onset changes in our blood biomarkers and our imaging. You can look across the different genetic mutations to understand relative rates of change, and we're using these now to start to design clinical trials. And I just want to end by saying there's a lot of interest in this consortium in thinking about sort of bringing the clinic to the patient through using remote and digital technologies. This, I think, can enable more inclusive research, reduce burden on the patients, and start to move us towards thinking about decentralized clinical trials. And so One of the technologies that we're looking at, we built this app to be available on iOS and Android. It has a suite of cognitive testing, motor testing. We can collect speech samples. We get passive data as well, so we can get information about step count, GPS, other information that help us maybe contextualize sort of a person's results. And we could pay people directly through the app to honor their time and commitment. So we're working on harmonizing this now across some of the different centers. We continue to work on piloting some of our data exploration tools in this request process, adding more cohorts. And one of the things we're really excited about, one of the upcoming initiatives of the FPI is to plan a global platform trial for tau mutation carriers. And we're looking at starting this off with a trial-ready cohort that's an observational study, but really maps closely to the conditions of a clinical trial. And there's a lot of benefits there, and happy to talk about that if we have a little bit more time. So I just want to end there and thank everybody that's been involved. This is a huge team effort and collaboration on the all-FTD side. These are all the investigators, and I want to thank the patients and the funding sources.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, so there's a lot of information. I did want, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Adam, but there are companies that have been engaging with these data sets, right? I mean, so I know I've heard this kind of question come up in other sessions of how do we package information and make information appealing or usable for industry, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we had a lot of interest and a lot of feedback from industry as we've gone through and presented these models. We have sort of a research roundtable setting in which we engage academic and industry partners together and have sort of elicited feedback on these models, both from industry as well as the FDA as we've gone through. Once we published them, we were able to sort of package this as a data set that mapped really closely on what we published in the paper and sort of made it really accessible to companies that wanted to build their own models as well. So people have been interested in this and engaged in this, and we're lucky in one of these forms of FTD, the progranulin mutation in particular, where there is quite a lot of interest from industry. There's over 10 companies in this space, and actually sort of, I think, have the maybe lucky problem of having more drugs and more trials than participants at this time. And so really the work now is trying to figure out how to do that and how to learn from that, I think, as we think about running clinical trials in some of these other forms of the disease.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just pivot to Carole for a second because she's done an enormous amount of work with her organization. And I just really quickly, can you talk about your ambassadors program? Because give me the numbers, because I was impressed by that too.
Yeah, so last year we started an ambassador program because our community just grew a little out of control. So we had family members kind of step up and say, we can help with our regional sub-community. So we trained 15 ambassadors, and next time we talk, it'll be more because we keep adding ambassadors, and they act as like our point contact within these regions, and they've done a tremendous job kind of bringing that community together, doing virtual and in-person regional meetups, helping us translate a lot of our collaborators and anything we're doing to the ambassadors, and then we give it to them and they give it to their community, and it's really helped bring us together and disseminate that information better, and then also the family's engagement and participation has increased as a result.
Yeah, so tell me the numbers really quickly. How many ambassadors?
15.
And how many countries?
38.
Yeah, okay, so contemplate that for in the 5-year time frame. I think Carole speaks to something, themes that I was thinking about when I had the good fortune to talk to these individuals, is scale and momentum, right? So you've seen examples, direct examples of how to kind of scale up. I think, Ryan, you're in the middle of sort of imagining what your future looks like, and I think you bring up a really important point of the critical importance of really thinking about what your end goal is in the beginning, even if that delays you initially, right? You have this desire to get going. You want to get this consortium, but you want to get it right. So can you talk a little bit more about sort of what are sort of some of the issues that you're contemplating without, revealing whatever you don't want to reveal, but so that people can be thinking about what do we have to, consider. And then I'm going to come back to Carole because you really did figure out some of these things of these are the principles and these are the rules of the game. And if you want on this game, you're going to play it by these rules, right? So Ryan, you first.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Pompeii is that it's not our first rodeo in a sense. There's been this sort of forming and storming and achievement along the way, and I guess in my mind, in a visual sense, there was this incredible organization effort and group of folks that came together to climb this mountain. And when they got there, the disappointment of it was that it was a false peak and there was like a little bit of a letdown. And now we're kind of gearing up for what the rest of the climb looks like. And now, because we have that experience, we know that maybe the thing that we think is the next peak, there's maybe another one further beyond that, and we want to prepare for that a little bit too. And it's not at all the disservice. I mean, there's an incredible amount, not just from that first expedition, let's call it. There's an incredible amount that was learned that we are better for in Pompeii for it. We have a whole bunch of programs that have come out of it. We've got newborn screening for 84% of the kids in the U.S. now, and if Texas gets their stuff together, we'll be up in the high 90s. But we want to go worldwide, right? Because it's still sub 3% worldwide. We've got multiple treatments. We've got all these things going on. Kids aren't dying if they're treated quickly enough. So there's an incredible achievement. It wasn't, at the time corrected, right? This is the late 90s and early 2000s. It wasn't the cure that we hoped it was. And I think now that the C word has become a bad word in RARE because of these kinds of letdowns for folks being demotivating. But it shouldn't be, and I think that should still be the aspiration. And we're a lot smarter now. So how do we go at this thing respecting our incredible history and also recognizing that it's time to chart a new history?
Okay. Carole, you made it sound so simple. You were told, here's your dream team, you're going to make a few phone calls and everyone's going to join. I can't imagine it was that easy. Not that I'm not an optimist, but I have to imagine there must have been some unanticipated hiccups, maybe some barriers. I don't know, I don't want to talk for you, but can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, we got a lot of pushback.
Okay.
Every single one of these institutions said, there's no way we're going to agree to these terms. We've never done this before. And by the way, here are our terms. And I mean, undeniably, we did fund a lot of the research, so it gave us some negotiating powers. But the pushback was unrelated to the funding terms, right? The pushback was like, oh, what, you want control? You want us to work together? And we got our collaborators on board. They met our families from that very first time. So they were pushing with us. So together we're going back and kind of taking it back to our why. We are doing this to save lives. We're doing this to help our children. We're not doing this for any other reason. And then we were very persistent, and we had hours and hours and hours of calls and meetings with every one of these institutions. And then I think we just broke them at the end. They're like, okay, fine. And just when it became personal and they really understood where we're coming from, and then you have your collaborator within the institution saying, I want to do this. This is good. I want to be part of the team. They were motivated by our children and families, but they are also motivated to work in this exciting collaboration. They've been each working in the lab for 20, 30 years. They've never linked their work to another collaborator. They've never linked their work to another person. And here we are, all these beautiful faces saying, hey, help us, do this for us. So it really was very motivating for them, exciting to work as a team. And if for whatever reason we have to postpone a meeting, they're like, oh, we missed meeting this month, because they want to share. They're eager to brainstorm and work together. And then the institutions came on board. They just agreed, and it's been, we haven't had any hiccups after that, because truly we're lucky that everyone has put the team first, and no one is kind of thinking about what is it for me. It's what is it for these kids? And
so since I work with a lot of lawyers, or at least a couple, I have to ask, did you then engage a lawyer that drew up the agreements? Because that can be an odyssey in and of itself.
Yeah,
but
we did. We had
Okay.
support from a lawyer early on, kind of thinking short term and long term. Here's what we want to do, and here's where we want to get to. And they kind of helped us draft some of these terms, and especially when it comes to language around IP and the intellectual property and language like that. And then we kind of went back and said, here's what it is. It ended up being tweaked based on everyone's input, but we did eventually get to a language that everyone agreed to.
I'm still stunned because it was still 9 sets of lawyers and you still got there. But okay, good, congratulations. Adam, you know, I read the paper, you know, the evolution from having a single site observational study to this, you know, massive multi-cohort global trial. There must have been, again, not just sort of picking up the phone, getting meetings going, that notion of joining forces and joining the consortium. Were there learnings there? Were some places slower? Were there things that you learned where uptake was better and people were more willing and eager to sort of share, so to speak? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, you know, I think, there's always challenges in trying to set something like this up and getting everybody to agree. You know, I think, I could talk a little bit to where we're sort of, where we're going now with this, which is continued growth and incorporation. And, you know, it's a lot to ask of a new site, of a new center to sort of collect this natural history protocol. So one of the things that we've done there is really try to focus on sort of slimming down the variables that we're collecting, the data we're collecting, to those that are sort of most useful, and having this kind of minimal harmonized data set that we ask everybody to collect. So part of it is having sort of initial ask that is sort of small enough that, you know, investigators can continue to do all of the other things that they're doing to answer questions as well, right? We have to sort of incentivize people also respecting their own research. For academics, right, it's really important to be able to continue your own line of things, and so they don't feel like you're taking over kind of the work that they're doing. I think there's a lot of recognition in the community that to really do this, we need larger sample sizes. To understand the data, we need larger sample sizes. And to run clinical trials in this space, they're going to have to be global, and to understand how this disease progresses, the natural history of it, we need to be able to bring together people around the world to support, I think, applications for clinical trials. So, I think there's understanding there that have led to successes, and I think there's other ways to sort of help incentivize participants as well, gaining access to the larger data set, right? When you become part of the consortium, you have access to all of this, and you can do data requests. We're working on the governance structure there so that anybody who participates can carry out research with the larger data set as well.
And does that seem to be a successful carrot, so to speak? I mean, that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, some of the centers that are just getting up and running appreciate the support with sort of helping select variables, helping sort of feel included and getting access to all of this research. So I think so. We're sort of also going through the process of doing qualitative interviews with stakeholders from all of the different sites, and we're sort of in latter stages, but many of these same issues have sort of popped out as sort of themes in those interviews of, ownership of data, patient data security, and so we're trying to understand that now through qualitative interviews as we move forward too.
Okay. I have no idea how much time I have because it's been 4 here on the timer. So 25 minutes, okay, great. I have several more questions, but some of the smartest questions I heard were from audiences over the last couple of days. So I'll keep my eye on the mics, but I'd rather not just sort of run out of time and say, sorry, we didn't. So if you have a question or somebody maybe is walking around, we can keep asking. I just would like to get to them because these are some amazing resources, and probably you have questions that I haven't anticipated, and folks right next to you want to hear the same thing. So, and I see someone already, okay.
Thank you. Carole, I'm also amazed that you were able to achieve this, and I wonder, is there a template for the agreement that you might be able to share? I have seen other advocacy groups share, for instance, their policy on working with industry, or their policy on patient data privacy as a sample, so that there's a guide for new groups to follow. I imagine because you were just starting, maybe that was a little bit easier. I think about Pompeii, where there's been such work for so many years. I can imagine that people might be a bit more stubborn in terms of joining and sharing information? And secondly, in terms of if any money were to be made out of this, will the patient population share in that money or only the research collaborators?
Yeah, thank you. So happy to share the agreement. I can kind of take some information out and it'll be okay to share after that. So my email flashed earlier, but if you go to our website, jordansguardianangels.org, you'll be able to find me. I'm happy to share the verbiage there. The second question, what was the second question? Oh, patient, yes. So the way the agreement is written today, that it will get divided amongst the 10, so the 9 institutions and the foundations. There's nothing like direct kind of gain for the patient population, but as a foundation, I mean, these funds will be kind of used to continue to support the effort we're doing in an indirect way. But there's, in the agreement, there isn't a direct gain for the community itself, but for the foundation indirectly. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we have another one, okay.
Hi, I'm Barry Weber. I'm the Data Protection Officer and Chief Information Security Officer for Global Gene, so I've got a very biased view of the world. I'm wanting to understand how you've approached patient privacy and how you're approaching data security of patient data, especially as you share it.
I want to start. Who? Yeah.
I can go philosophically on it. So for me, anytime we're talking about any kind of ethical discussions or privacy discussions or anything like that, this idea that patients are dumb and can't make decisions for themselves is a crass way of saying what the current field of play is, and that we need to have sort of these parental figures making decisions on their behalf. And for me, this is certainly wouldn't pass any of the 9 lawyers, but it's something like give people a chance to actually be informed about what they're doing, and if they choose to participate, let's get out of the way. If they want to lean forward and come together, let's get out of the way. And so we should really challenge where we're following some mythical compliance roadmap, or versus where we're actually getting the letter that gives people autonomy of their own information.
Yeah, I mean, I could say that data security and privacy has been a sort of key piece of how we've thought about storing this information, I think, from the beginning. And some of that is sort of at the individual consortium level. So I could say within the sort of the North American consortium that I'm part of, there's several different steps upon which we try to protect patient privacy and sort of the information that's being incorporated. So certain things, so everything is de-identified. We take out, we follow sort of all the principles around kind of standard de-identifiers. We do things like when we display data, sometimes we don't use scatter plots and show individual data points so things can be identifiable. We don't represent data if the groups are small enough. We don't share data if it's sort of a cohort of 2 or 3 people with a single mutation, or at least there's got to be a whole lot of different additional discussions around how to do that. We also, when we share the data, we have a second level of de-identification that's put on top of it. And then there's some nuances with different data types. So for example, MRI, there's been, if anybody's familiar with this, but with brain MRI, you actually have a patient's face that's part of the MRI, right? And so, people have shown that if you have a list, if you're able to find who's in the study and you had their faces, you could actually map fairly well a face back to a brain image, and that could be de-identifying. So now there's software that's been developed to actually strip the face from the scan, put on a new face that can't be, so we had to pause data sharing for a year while we now refaced everybody's images. And another example is, so through the smartphone app, we're collecting speech samples of people. And these could be potential biometric identifiers, both through the kind of quality of their speech, and sometimes people's speech themselves can actually reveal things about themselves that you could narrow down who they are. And so, at least initially, our plan is to keep the raw data files on a secure server, make it accessible to people, so researchers or industry partners who want to run an algorithm on it, they can do so on our server. But otherwise, we'll share sort of summary statistics about frequency and pause length and things like that. But so anyways, it's very sort of nuanced within the different data types as far as how we think about sharing. Is that answer your question.
And Carole, you're starting your natural history study, right? Or you,
We are. Our registry is actually through Simon Searchlight, so we partnered with them very early on. When there was, 10 of us at that point, we were lucky to get in early enough, and so they handle all that. As a foundation, we don't have access to any of this information. Our research team can access it through, the protocols and the right channels. But Simon's does provide us with reports. Like if we ask them, hey, what are we finding out about vision differences, they'll provide us with that information in a report form. So as a foundation, we don't have access to any of the raw data, and Simon's works with our families to identify and get them consented and into the registry.
We have a question.
oh, okay.
Oh, hi, Dr. Staffaroni. Thank you so much for sharing with the group about FTD. I think your slides really talk about the robustness and the cooperation between families and scientists. And being an FTD family member, I just really appreciate all that you guys have done. And I just wanted to share with the group, in 2006 was the year that they identified progranulin. And now here we are 17 years later with 4 potential therapeutics. And it really happened over about 13 or 14 years. So there's tremendous effort that's been done by scientists who really care about families. So thank you very much for sharing with the group.
Yeah, and thank you for your comment.
Yeah, right.
Well, and really the applause should be turned back to, I think, patients and families and advocacy organizations like yourself that have been such a critical part of this whole process, that have, been there from the beginning. I think engaging with both the companies and the FDA to sort of instill this sense of urgency, and to us as scientists, this sense of urgency around finding a cure and finding treatments. And so I think that's been an incredibly important part of this process for progranulin. And I think, now as we think about turning towards treatment trials in tau mutation carriers as well, I think we're starting to think about some of the families that can really help with sort of organizing amongst themselves and being a really loud and amplified voice in I think forwarding this sense of urgency to our industry partners.
And this brings to mind something I talked to you about, Carole, about you going to see Scott Demarest, right? And this notion, I think we've talked about how do we provide care within the research setting. And I believe you work within a setting where you're seeing patients, right? Is that correct? Yeah. Can you speak, and Carole too, because you had an experience that I think was a little bit life-changing for your daughter. So can you talk a little bit about how, because these I think are almost like pilots where it really is creating an optimized treatment opportunity.
Yeah, so when patients come in for our research programs, as I mentioned, they come in for 2 to 3 days of visits with us, and it's really comprehensive, and we ask a lot of them. And one of the things that we try to do as a way of giving back and making it meaningful for them as well is sort of summarizing that in sort of not a formal clinical visit, but what, at our center, for example, we always do an hour-long family conference where we bring in everybody that's been involved. So the neurologist that saw the patient, the neuropsychologist that did the cognitive testing, we have genetic therapists, social workers. Everybody comes to these meetings and sort of summarizes what we've done and treat it in many ways like a clinical visit, and sort of providing feedback about all of the data that we've acquired and helping them think through recommendations for treatment and care planning moving forward.
Yeah, it's really great. Carole, you want to talk to you? You're echoing, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, absolutely. So you heard, the talk about the multidisciplinary clinic yesterday, and I shared that in one of the breakout sessions. But we live in Colorado, so we're a drive away from the amazing, hospital with all the multidisciplinary clinics. And actually last year at this summit, I met one of our doctors from Colorado that ran another multidisciplinary clinic. And I connected, and I begged and pleaded to see my daughter within the clinic, and we did that. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, after 5 years or kind of seeing doctors and me doing all the talking about everything that we're doing, we actually walked away with, a list of things to follow up on and for her care, and it improved her care significantly. So it was really nice to be able to benefit from that after all that time. So highly recommended, and we actually have a Jordan syndrome clinic within Colorado now, so we're excited about that too.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to just pivot a little bit because, we're talking about data, and I remember so eloquently Chris Hempel in the opening plenary interview talked about data being king. So I think we probably collectively agreed upon that. And there are a number of data collection platforms that we've heard about today that are available to collect this important information. But I also have heard that it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that people are just going to run to these platforms to enter their data. It could be they don't have time, it's not easy, it's that there are any kinds of other barriers. So have you thought about, and people who've had kind of what you're going to do, because you both have thought about things in advance, including Ryan too. So that's got to be something that's on your mind, like as you sort of recruit people to participate and longitudinally collect data that's going to require multiple inputs, right, from families. So you're adding on to their workload already. But have you thought about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, for us, that's where our ambassadors play a big role in that. We just unleash them, and they give them resources to go explain why it's needed, where we're at, and how it starts with us, it ends with us. Without our participation, nothing is going to happen. And we've seen a huge improvement in participation due to that, because families really just, they know a little too much that our data managers and the crowd will be a little uncomfortable with that, but they really get to the nitty gritty, did you do this step? Do you know how that works? Do you need any help? And they've been just like the pillars that pushed our community to participate. And our numbers are still not where we want them to be, but we've definitely, if I had to pick one thing that we've tried, and we've tried a lot of things that have helped, it's that one-on-one connection to support our communities to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you make, this ongoing education, because just because the platform is up, it's not necessarily a build it and they will come. And it requires education and reminders and training. Yeah. So on top of everything else, you've put together this training program. So it's not necessarily, if you become an ambassador, you're making a commitment to learn how to do it, to disseminate information in a very clear but also consistent way. And that probably helps with uptake, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a 2-year commitment, and there is a training required at the beginning of that. But before we disseminate any big information to our community, we have an ambassador meeting first. We make sure they're prepared, they know the information, so they can help answer questions and kind of reiterate what we're trying to do. So yeah, it is a big commitment from our families, but it was also an outlet for them to be involved, right? So we have many in our communities what can we do, how we can help? So we've created the ambassador program, and we've created the special projects program. So any families that want to dabble in the mission without doing that day in and day out, they had outlets to channel their journey into moving us forward, and it's been really amazing to do that.
Yeah. Terrific. And there is something so valuable in this peer-to-peer education and peer-to-peer support, because to hear this information and to have this appeal come from another individual who knows exactly what you're going through is a much more compelling ask, and probably leads to greater success rates, right? So that's great. Are you seeing any other questions?
So I thought about the platform discussion a whole lot. I've got spreadsheets on it, and I've got just sort of countless hours into it. I thought about what are the features of this idealized thing that I think would be good. I talked to other people about that, what they want, and then I made a list of all the platforms that I was aware of and scored them against it all. And it was helpful to try to be objective in that way, but really there's a couple of things that were priority amongst all the other truths or all the other wishes. And for me, I would say, there's lots of different options out there, but the couple of things that I would really encourage are paramount is individual ownership of the data, and that each person has autonomy over their own information. That's for me a fundamental human right, and something that we should be moving towards with our data that we do not have in our history with our data. And then the other one is sort of future compatibility. So how does it when we're running low on sample size, or when we're trying to learn about another feature of our disease that we didn't know about, is there data that we can reach to our left and to our right to other conditions that might be similar? How do we start to level up the entire thing and make sort of all of our effort networked in a way that is bigger than just our disease when that's needed? And so I think those are a couple things I would encourage anybody looking at their own platforms or looking to get into data space to keep top of mind.
Yeah, that was another thing I heard too, that I always learn something here all the time, but the other day was that, if you're signing a consent form for an observational trial, or any kind of trial for that matter, or what you're doing, ask them what they're going to do at the completion of the trial. And if they don't have an answer for you, you're going to have a bit of an issue. So that's just something to keep in mind, that talks to sort of the portability, because we fully anticipate this is why RareX, among other platforms, is so committed to data federation, because we're already seeing trends across multiple disease conditions that map on and have similarities. And Dr. Ritter yesterday, talked about leveling up the science and leveling up the advocacy. And I think, we're much stronger as a group, collectively. And there might be more similarities than differences. And if we can really have that data that belongs to the individual patient, that's going to allow us to be able to see trends across many, many different kinds of data sets.
I would just echo that, I think, and highlight that for a second, which is sort of the availability of data that's come out of clinical trials, placebo-arm data, is so critical to be able to get back into the community, to have access to. And so, something that we've been talking a lot about is sort of how you can, ensure that access is there for researchers and other companies to sort of analyze and help plan in the future, especially in the rare disease space. All that data is so precious.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess, and this is sort of where instead of the key takeaway per se, it's more like, so if you were to envision 5-10 years from now, paint a picture, what does it look like? Where do you think we can go with all of this data collection effort? I mean, just to sort of make the case for the importance of collecting this patient-level data.
So, we hope that we'll be able to prove that our model works, and it becomes a model for other groups in the rare space and other space to use, and kind of go out and encourage their institutions and their collaborators and their families and everyone to really work on this in a true collaborative way and push it forward. Where we've come to appreciate that the science is a lot harder than what we thought when we first started. So we still have some key questions that we haven't answered in the science, but really looking at how do we take these shots at goal and continue going while we're doing all this important work, in terms of the science and everything else.
Yeah.
I think for me, I do this exercise a lot, thinking about what into the future and what are the cool parts about it. And I don't try to limit it to 5 or 10 years. I try to see how far my imagination can go, and then figure out, and then set that as a direction, and then figure out what are some steps that I can do tomorrow or today that at least are going in that direction, even if it's not by a large amount. And I just kind of want to reiterate something that Carole said at the beginning that I think is the recipe for getting anywhere, is set your expectation for what your pace is. By setting a meeting every 2 months for your collaboration network, people don't show up and say, okay, cool, let's skip the meeting. You have an expectation now. We're like, oh man, I had something to share. And I think how cool would it be if we had all of our researchers, all of our community excited that we expected new things to happen every 2 months, to like that kind of cadence. What if it was even faster than that? So like setting the cadence, setting your expectation for how this will go. Why not be super ambitious with it and figure out what steps get you there?
Yeah, I think I'm really optimistic that things sort of continue moving in this direction of having sort of a harmonized data collection plan sort of globally for the disease that we're studying. And I think that way, as our sort of biologist and chemist colleagues continue to work out the biology and the treatments, that we really have a cohort that's ready and to engage in trials as they come on board. I'm excited about sort of thinking about these, the platform trial design. And what we're thinking about is a large global natural history study that really mimics those conditions. I mentioned this. I think one of the things that we're learning is that it's a little challenging to take some of the inferences from a natural history study and use them to support a clinical trial, particularly if you're talking about using supplemental placebo arm data in a clinical trial. I think the more closely a natural history study maps onto the conditions, the sites, the investigators, the having monitors, the measures, the more consistent all those things are, I think the more powerful the data. So I think I'm looking forward to sort of trying to establish such a run-in cohort that can lead into a platform trial. And just as a last note, I think you mentioned sort of neighboring diseases. I think the other thing, I mentioned in FTD, a lot of people also have ALS, but the ALS communities and the FTD communities have been siloed for a long time with sort of enrolling patients differently and different measures. And so we're now in the conversations of sort of how do we start to get a minimum harmonized data set so we can share insights across these diseases, because it's likely that many of the treatments may affect upstream biology that's going to be common across all of them. So the more natural history data we have, the more patients that are ready to sort of participate in trials, I think the more we'll accelerate progress.
Great. Do we have any other questions? No? Everything answered? Well, I think we might end about a minute early, but I just think, hopefully you've gotten really these different perspectives. I was so inspired because, to be able to see it at various continuums, I know that people in the audience are all at different places. So to be able to see it at each of the junctures, I think is really exciting. So if you can join me in giving this group of people a round of applause, I'd appreciate it.